Gabe.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second half of our presentation today for Celebrate Cybersecurity. We're going to welcome our panelist, Elythia McAnarney. She's with PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and she's going to talk to us about NIST, right?
Correct.
Okay. And before we get started, I'd like to go over webinar ground rules. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. You could chat with me. I'm Christopher Garcia in the background. And if you have a problem with the Zoom meeting, feel free to put it in the chat. And then you could raise your hand if something's going wrong throughout the presentation, or if you want to ask a question at the end. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our hostess with the mostest, Steffie Rawlings. Steffie?
Hi, thank you, Christopher. Greetings and welcome to our third week of webinars as we celebrate Cybersecurity Awareness Month. My name is Steffie Rawlings, and I'm the coordinator of the New Mexico Small Business Development program called Technology Commercialization Accelerator here at New Mexico Tech. The TCA has collaborated with the New Mexico Cybersecurity Centers of Excellence, also here at New Mexico Tech, to celebrate Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We have been providing webinars related to education, careers, and this week, industry. Next week will be community. And we have been presenting these webinars throughout the month of October. We have scheduled 2 webinars a week as we try to provide cybersecurity awareness to the residents of New Mexico. We are recording these presentations, and the recordings will be placed on the New Mexico Small Business Development Center YouTube channel. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. We are glad you are here to help us celebrate and hopefully to learn more about cybersecurity. I would like to thank all the panelists and speakers that will be presenting during this event. And thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Elythia McAnarney as CFCM, CPCM, PTAC Advisor, Government Contract Expert. Over to you, Elythia.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can get the slides up. So that's always my biggest challenge, is technical. And let's see. Go here. I can hide that, and I can change. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep,
Yes.
looks good.
Okay, good. So thank you. As they said, I'm Elythia McAnarney. I'm from the Procurement Technical Assistance Center here in New Mexico. We are funded on a grant with DLA in the state of New Mexico, and all our services are free. So I want to make sure you understand that. So if you have any questions or anything about this particular presentation or any of our services, please feel free to reach out to us, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Cybersecurity, NIST Special Publication 800-171 is the topic for this particular time. I'm going to go over the NIST requirements, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR 52204-21. And we're going to go into the DFARS 252.204-7012, the interim rules, and the cybersecurity maturity model certification. I will touch briefly on that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will touch on it. Okay, the big picture is controlled unclassified information, CUI. How is it protected? And how do we control what we have in our systems? The NIST Special Publication 800-171 and why it came about with the FAR requirements. And sometime in the future, it would not surprise me if the NIST 800-171 gets incorporated into the FAR. I'll go into a little about that. And then the DFARS and how that incorporated the NIST currently. Cybersecurity. Well, it's Cybersecurity Month. What is that? It's controlling and keeping safe the information we have on our systems. I will tell you this, all these slides are going to be available to you. I do not read off my slides. I kind of highlight and I try to give you additional information than that's on the slides. But at the end of the presentation, when you do receive these slides, you will receive 19 attachments. And it sounds like a lot, but what I'm hoping to provide you is information that you can take and use and not start with a blank sheet of paper, because that's the last thing we want to look at is a computer or a blank screen and going, oh my God, where do I start? Okay. So hopefully by the time I finish this presentation, you'll have an understanding of where to start and how to move forward. If I did this correctly. So anyway, what are threats? Well, we hear of them all the time. Malicious code, ransomware. But you know what? That's the software threats behind the scene. What about loss of equipment? What about unauthorized access? Or what happens if our equipment fails? Do we have a plan on how to recover? Things to think about. Okay. If any of that happens, it's going to reduce our competitive edge and we can lose our reputation, let alone financial cost and everything to replace it or try to get back into working order. So what the NIST 800-171 is dealing with is non-federal organizations. That's you and I. Federal contracts, subcontract, state, local, tribal, colleges and universities. They all get impacted by this particular special publication. So it's something we need to be aware of. Why did that come out? Because it's an urgent, it's a national security requirement that we secure our controlled and classified information. It affects everything we do, our economic view, our national security interests of the United States. It affects all of us. But you know what? It's not only there, but what about our personal information? That's part of it too. We don't want that all out there. So we need to secure it. As a business owner or as an employee, you need to be aware of the responsibilities that we have. This has come into effect because billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars worth of research and development that we, the United States, has paid for has been stolen. We need to get that to stop. We need to get that back under control. And we can if we work together. It's not impossible. We've been through a lot in this United States, and we just have to keep moving together forward. We need to protect, and we need to know and understand what information in our systems do we need to protect. The DFARS is part of DoD. DFARS 252-204-7012. They have incorporated the NIST 800-171. And I'll go into that a little bit further as we move forward. What are we protecting? Well, we've got public information, social media. That's all out there. We know it. And once it's out there, it's out there. They're not going to stop it. So we need to understand what is going out in social media about us, about our companies, and what information we have. Confidential business information. You have financial, technical, you have personnel information in your systems. Federal contract information, FCI, is controlled by the FAR 52-204-21 And I'm going to spend some time on this particular item here. And then a smaller group, but a very important group, is the controlled unclassified information, which is now being handled or safeguarded by NIST Special Publication 800-171. So it's a part of that. Okay. An executive order back in 2010, 13556 was put out there to establish what was considered CUI and how was it marked. So the National Archives and Record Administration was assigned the task to go figure that out. Now remember, this came out in 2010. They came out with a repository, a CUI register. This is that site that explains what is considered CUI, and they have 20 categories. Within these categories, there are lower tiers. I just happened to pick defense just to show you. And you can see there's 4 lower tiers. In there, once you go to it, it goes into further detail on how to mark it, category market banner, and it just explains how to move forward. I'm not going to spend the time on this, but you can find it on that site. Okay, we have the physical media. Once we get that media and we print it, what do we do with that? Well, there's requirements. We need to have a cover sheet to protect it. And yes, it's bright. And yes, you're going, well, why would I want that on my desk? Well, you know what? Sometimes we're working and we forget we have something called CUI on our desk or on our thumb drive. We need to know what it is, and we need to be able to store it. We do not sit in our offices 8 to 10 hours a day without leaving it. I'm sorry, but I just sometimes have to go down the hall. And I need to remember that that document is on front of me so that I can put it in a drawer and lock it, or lock my drawer, my office door when I leave, so that it's not just sitting out there while I go down the hall or to the next office. We need to be vigilant about this. Storage and handling of CUI, your systems will be considered adequate. Okay, adequate. What does that mean? It means that if you are following the NIST Special Publication 800-171, your system will be considered adequate. No systems are completely secure. We know that. It's a daily battle. You think you have it run today and tomorrow there's something else. But if you are following these requirements, your system will be considered adequate. Okay? So don't try to get through it. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is NIST. I've referred to NIST a couple of times. That's what it is. They're non-regulatory agency of the U.S. Department. Okay? That means they don't put the regulations out there. They do put a lot of information out there that we can use. NIST provides neutral technical expertise, guidance, and reference materials. For a long time, I didn't even know they existed. And when I got to this site, it was like, oh my gosh, there is so much information out there that can be used, not only for cybersecurity, but for other things. So it's a good site just to have in your back pocket. And this is the site, just to see what's there. But for this presentation, we're going to say NIST has a lot of requirements, a lot of information to help you meet the requirements you need to meet. They're not their requirements, they're the government's, okay? NIST had an executive order given to them, 13636, in February of 2013. And that was to come up with a cybersecurity framework and some guidance. They completed that task in 2015. So it took them a couple of years. But look at this. In 2013 is when they received their guidance. They received their guidance after NARA was going through the CUI to figure out what it was. Then NIST came into play. And they finished their task in 2015. 2015 is when they came out with the NIST Special Publication 800-171. And that's what everyone's hearing about now. Now, when they came up with this, it was to be as a guide on how to protect, for the government to use this as a guide in when they're doing their subcontractors with prime contractors and moving forward, to make sure those companies were having security requirements that they could accept the CUI on how they move forward. They came up with the NIST cybersecurity framework, which was a 5-step process. The core, it says identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. But look at this. It's in a circle. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Da, 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 da. It's not a straight line. That means this has to go on daily. It is continuously. You do not put this together and put it on the shelf and say, I'm done, check mark. This is something that has to be completely worked daily, weekly, monthly, however it is in your policies and procedures, or however your system identifies something. That's how important this is. Identify, you develop organizations, you find out what people are working, you protect what's in your system, you detect what's in the background. You can read all this, learn how to respond, and most of all, recover from it. You know, incidents are going to happen. Things are going to happen. No one is safe from it not happening. It's just a matter of when. So you want to be that far ahead. And you know what? When I talk to people and when I work with clients myself, when I say you're going to develop and implement a recovery process, you know, everyone has soft copies. I'm sorry. That recovery plan, I highly suggest it's on a binder with pages marked on what to do, who to call, who to notify, and it's on a shelf you can grab and take care of. Because if your computers get locked, how are you going to get to it? Something to think about. Okay? In their plan or their requirements, they came out with the security families, 14 of them. And they're all listed here. And this is the coding and the sections. 14 families, but look at the first one, access control. There's 22 requirements out of the 110. And you can see they're all down here. These are the total requirements. So as you hear people talking, they'll talk about the NIST 871, the 110 requirements. Well, this is what they're referring to here. Okay? It's a lot, but like an elephant, you don't swallow it in one bite. Take it a little at a time. And hopefully I can help you take it slow. They also developed a 3-step process. Develop a system security plan. Know what you have to do. Conduct an assessment. Well, NIST also understood you're not going to meet these requirements in one sitting. Nobody is. So put a plan of action together with milestones on when you're going to meet them. And that's extremely important. When you do your security plan, your assessment, and you go through to see what you've missed or what you still need to do, don't put unrealistic dates and say, okay, this I can meet tomorrow or next week. And then it starts pushing to the right because you didn't think it through in the full picture. So now it just looks like you've put dates and you had no serious thought to this process. That can open a can of worms for you that you do not want to go down. Just be realistic. Don't put it down 5 years because that's not going to be acceptable. But be realistic and have a plan on how you're going to meet these requirements. Okay. There came up, you have the 14 families, the 110. They came up with NIST 800-171A, which has 210 objectives. These objectives go into further explanation on how to meet the requirements that are listed here on the 110. When you get an audit, and sometimes on future, you will have an audit for some reason, okay? These objectives is what the auditor is going to use to find out if you meet those requirements. So get familiar with them. Don't be afraid. You can move forward. You can do it. That is your A, and that's how these two. This last column is the FAR. Remember I said the basic FAR is FAR 52-204-21. Well, look at here. The FAR only touches 6 families, but it meets 17 requirements of the NIST 800-171. And that's extremely important to keep in mind. The basic FAR is here. It has 15 specific requirements with no third-party certification. This is all based on you, okay? There is no third party, no certificate. So if a company says, I can help you meet the FAR 52-204-21 and provide you a certificate for that, just say, let's think about that. Because that's not something you need to pay for. They might help you, and there's companies out there that will help you, but they're not going to promote giving you a certificate, especially if you don't need it. Okay? Be wary. When they come and do an audit, the 800-171A is what they're going to use. 800-171A is one of the attachments you will receive, so you can have it for yourself. But this is what it is. Here's the FAR requirement. Here's the NIST requirement that it meets. And here's the family that it's associated with. Okay? And I have them here. Now, remember I said the FAR, the 15 requires meets 17 of the NIST. Here's where the extra 2 get picked up under the escort visitors, under the physical protection. And here's the rest of them. All this says is just because the FAR 52-204-21 is your contract doesn't mean that's the only cybersecurity requirement or security requirement. You need to be mindful of that, okay? This part of the presentation, I'm going through the FAR, and there's a reason for it, so bear with me. The FAR 52-204-21 B1I says limit information system access to authorized users. You can read it. This part here that you see in a light blue, is part of the NIST 800-171A. And it goes into explanation on what it takes to meet this requirement. If you are missing one of these, you have not met this requirement. And that's extremely important as we move forward. But what I've done here for you is put that requirement, put the NIST 800-171 underneath, and giving you a short little example or sentence to how to meet it. You want to control who can log into your company computer. Okay, this is basically what it says. And here's your NIST reference. Here's the B1II, Limit Information System Access. This one only has 2 in order to meet that requirement. So it's make sure you limit users in their roles. What does that mean? Well, that means if you have more than 2 employees, okay, even yourself, more than one employee, that employee doesn't have to have access to everything you have access to. That employee could be a technical person, and yet you have access to all your technical, your payroll, your accounting, firewalls. And that's another requirement, but only give them access to what they need. And when you're into a certain part of the system, maybe you have different logins. So if and when there is a breach, you only destroyed one part of it, not your whole system. Okay. Things to keep in mind. This one, verify and control, limit connections. And you see how it has how to identify and limit and control. Basically, you want to be aware of the applications that can be ran on your system and personal devices. Now, this one gets a little trickier now because a lot of us are using our own little telephones, mini computers, tablets, where before we didn't have that. But remember I told you NIST 800, the NIST site has other information. They have a write-up regarding mobile phones and regarding tablets and how to control and stuff. So you can read something. You're not on your own. They're there. And here's the NIST requirement. Control information posted or processed on publicly accessible information system. This one is so important. Social media is out there and everyone uses it for everything. You need to be careful and be aware of what your employees are going to be putting out there about your company. We had a prime example of a company that won a contract. An employee received an increase. This particular employee put out in social media that this particular contract they had worked on, and it was very intense. And because of that, but there was a little bit more information than need be. That company got into great big trouble. I don't know all the details. That's okay. I know enough that I need to watch what I put out in social media. And then I need to make sure my businesses understand what their employees are doing with their information. So you need to train. Identify information system users right here. This one has 3. So you want to make sure the person that's signing in is the only one that uses that sign in, that login. Okay, here's the NIST reference. Authentication. Basically, you want hard to guess passwords in order to meet that. A 4-digit password can be broken in an hour. a 6-digit, maybe 3, 8 digits, 8 to 10. When you start getting past 12 with alphanumeric special characters, it starts getting a little bit more difficult. Be aware of that. Have your employees use sentences or whatever and make them longer. Okay. Media protection, sanitize and destroy. You want to have something in place that people know, even yourself, what happens when they turn in their cell phone to upgrade. Do they remember to take that chip out? Does that chip get destroyed? Or anything else? And it's not only phones. What about our printers? What about our laptops? They all have memory. Do we have a way of getting rid of that and make sure they're clean before we pass them on to somebody else? Or need be, do we have a way of destroying them properly? It just depends. And it's not only those. What about our little thumb drives? Okay, our little CDs that we may have information on. Limit physical access to your organization. Okay, basically you want to think about the physical space of where your computers are. You may have a server. Where is that server? Is it with your office supplies and is it wide open? Or is it in a room by itself? Or is it with your office supply in a locked cabinet? I don't know. But is it secure so that not anybody can just go to it and stick a thumb drive in it or touch a button or go log in? Those are things to think about as you move things. Here's our escort visitors. Do not allow visitors to be in your facility without an escort. We want to trust our families and our friends. And how many times have we heard different incidents happen? Don't take the chance. Okay? Have some rules. Have some guidance. Know where they are. Know who is in the building or in the area. Maintain an audit log of physical access. When somebody comes in, to have them sign in and out. So if anything happens, and not that they would do it, but who was in the area at the time, a visitor from another company, a relative, a friend, it doesn't matter. Just so that you know who was there and you can address it. Okay. And I will tell you something. This one here is the easiest one to take care of, but the one that's least taken care of. And whistleblowers are looking for anything and everything they can find that will put them up there. An audit log of physical access where people sign in and out. And if they don't see that, then what else are you not doing that you said you were doing in order to meet this requirement? Food for thought. Okay. Control and manage physical accesses on your devices. You want to make sure people just don't have a way of locking or walking out with your devices, that they're locked up and controlled. Okay. Monitor, control, and protect organization communication. This is internal and external. Have a web proxy or a firewall. Some of these can be done automatically on your systems, just so that you can protect them and have something there. Implement some networks for public access. When somebody says, can I use your network? Maybe you have a guest network and don't let them into your main network. so that they can't just get in your system. Those are things to think about. Okay. Identify, report, and correct information system flaws. There's always corrections coming out. Do you have a way of keeping track and how your systems are updated? Is there a log? Do you know all your systems are being updated at a certain time or within a certain period? Those updates come out for a reason, because something was identified. Don't become a victim because you did not update your system. Provide protection from malicious code. That's your anti-malware, your sandbox and firewalls. What about the cell phones and the computers? Do you know how people are getting in? Are they leaving things logged in? Can they do that? Or do you have safeguards in your main computers? You want to think about that. Okay. Update malicious code protection. Determine how all the releases. Okay. Do you stay abreast of emerging threats? On one of the handouts, I give you a couple of sites that will give you updates to when threats are out and what needs to be done so that you can keep track of them. Do you have to read the whole document? No. Usually in the title, it says this document or this software has a threat, needs to be updated. If you don't have the software, file it. But if you do, you might want to pay attention to it. Stuff like that, okay? Perform periodic scans on your systems. You want to do real-time scans at times and download and be able to just see if there's something in the back happening behind the scenes. And if there is, do you know what to do and how to move forward? Okay. I just quickly went through the FAR 52204-21. And there's a reason, but let me finish with it first. In there, it didn't say anything about having written policies or doing a self-assessment on your devices. Those were up to you. But you need to consider doing that. I have cybersecurity insurance here. Not because I want you to go today and say, I need cybersecurity insurance right now. No. What I do suggest is you go find out how much cybersecurity insurance is and what are their requirements. Because the insurance companies have specific requirements to be met before they even think of you giving you cybersecurity insurance. And what if you meet those basics? How do you get this premium lowered? You're going to have to bring these up. Some of the contracts coming out are requiring cybersecurity insurance. So before you get stuck there, find out what you need to do and then move forward. Your computer files backup. Back up your files. You can, depending on the size of your company, some of them, there's thumb drives that can hold quite a bit now, or you have a terabyte that you put. Don't keep them plugged in. Take them out, put them in a fireproof safe. But most important, check your backups. Make sure your backups work. Too many companies have had to pay ransomware because when they went to go get their backups and plug them in, guess what? They didn't work. And it would have taken them 10 times longer to put that backup together than it did to pay the ransomware and pray and pray and pray that they got all their files back. Because just because you pay ransomware doesn't mean you're going to get everything back at one time. Think about that. Train your employees. Your employees are your first line of defense. They need to understand they are part of your business. They have information at stake just as well as your business because you hold their personal business information in your system. Train them. Let them know if they have questions, who to go talk to, and not feel silly. I train on cybersecurity, and I still need to go to somebody and say, does this look right? Or should I? Or did you send this to me? You know how many times I've gotten an email that someone didn't send to me? But because I had some training on what to look for, I was able to pick up the phone and take care of it very quickly and delete the email, not only from my email, but out of the system. Things to look and go forward in training, okay? I have QR codes here. I know these are out, they're everywhere, and you see them. Be careful with them. If you use them, put the URL that they should be going to underneath the code. So people like me who say, I'm not going to scan that, I can go to the code, to the URL myself. FBI urges anyone affected by QR crimes to report it. That's how much they were used for criminal purposes. There is an attachment regarding QR codes. You decide. Know who your customer is, and does it matter? Yes, because every customer has a different requirement. They may have additional requirements for cybersecurity, or they may be at a little less. It just depends. Cybersecurity compliance requirements. Remember, I said FAR 52204-21 is your basic requirement. It came out in 2014 and 2016. It was updated. It has 15 controls. It does not require a certification. Then we have the NIST as Special Publication 800-171 that was completed in 2015. Okay. DoD DFARS 252-204-7012 incorporated the NIST into this clause back in 2016. It wasn't even a year when it was completed yet. And they incorporated into this DFARS. The NIST by itself was not a requirement. It was knowledge. It was open to the public. When DoD incorporated in this DFARS, it became a legal requirement when they put this requirement into the contracts. That's where the 110 controls comes. So if you have a contract with this in it, this requirement is in place today. Don't wait for anything else. You should be working on it now. Okay. These next slides just go into the 252-204-7012, and I just kind of highlighted a few of the items. You will have a complete set of that DFARS rather, excuse me, goes into the executive order a little bit here, but it does not go apply to COTS, commercial off the shelf, but it does go for everything else. Okay. Defense contractors are required to meet those requirements in NIST to have an adequate security defense system to be considered. This came out in 2016 and was supposed to be met by December 31st, 2017. Unfortunately, when they did an audit in 2019, they found out too many contractors were not meeting this requirement. That became a huge problem. When you get an incident, there is a reporting requirement within the 252.204-7012, and this is the site you need to go on to report it. You have to do it within 72 hours of discovering the incident in order to be compliant. Keep that. Cloud services. If you're going to use cloud services and you're going to say, I'm going to wash my hands, use cloud services, and that's it, there are other requirements. And you need to make sure it is FedRAMP approved. Here is the site that shows cloud services. I'm not going to go into this because that's a whole different subject in itself, but it is a requirement and it can be used and it can be helpful if used properly. Okay. The supply chain, prime contractors are responsible for their subs. They have to flow down the FAR 52204-21 as a requirement, as well as the DFARS. So the primes are now going to do their due diligence, not only to see if you can do the work, but how are your systems being controlled? How are you going to handle the information they're going to give you? Okay? Because if there is a breach, the contract can be terminated. There could be past performance issues and a potential False Claim Act allegation. We're not just putting this out saying, if it happens, it happens. No, we're checking to see what you said you have and have done is accurate and complete. If you do not meet those requirements, the False Claim Act, this is the Claim Act here, and I'm not going to read it, but Department of Justice got involved now. Fraud Initiative as of October 6, 21. They are going after contractors that are saying they are meeting these requirements and are not. We've just had one that ended up paying over $9 million. And guess what? They end up paying the $9 million to settle the claim, and they still have to spend the money to get their systems up to date because they were not truthful in their statement of how they were moving forward. So it's holding contractors accountable. And basically, it's making sure that the contractors that do meet this requirement are not going to be overlooked when getting the contract because somebody's not meeting the requirements is having a lower rate. So, and not explaining what they are doing. The False Claim Act, they're going to pursue knowingly failure to comply with the cybersecurity standards. They misrepresentation, or they fail to timely report suspected breaches. That's what they're looking for. And those are the people they're going to go after. And you know what? Whistleblowers are going to be great at bringing that foot forward. So if somebody in your IT department says, you know, we're not meeting this, we really need to look at it, it would behoove you to listen and not to say, it's okay, you can go find a job someplace else. Just a little thought. There are interim rules. The interim rule is that they came up with 719 because now you're going to do a self-assessment and put your score in the SPRS system. 7020 says that the government has the right to come and see that you're actually meeting that score that you put in that system. And 7021 says when the CMMC is available, you will meet that requirement. Okay, these are the DFARS. This is the interim rule. This is the site that you go to. But in order to get to that registration, you need to be part of the Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment, the PIE. You need to get a login with that. In order to get a login, you need a cage code. When you go in, if you put your cage code in and it doesn't show up, don't fight the system. Just call the number here. Let them know you need to get registered. They'll put it in for you. You'll go through these steps here. And then when you finish, you're going to log out, log back in, and you should have that symbol, the SPRS symbol. If it's not there, don't fight it. Call the help desk. Say, I need access to this particular area, and they'll give it to you. Don't go logging out, logging in, logging out, logging in, because it's only going to get frustrating. Okay? These instructions I got directly from them, so I put them in the slides so you have them. Okay? This is the DFARS 252-204-7019 is the SBA, as the Special Publication 800-171, DoD assessment requirements. You're going to score yourself and against the NIST 800-171A and do a self-assessment. Doing that self-assessment, you're going to put in the details. By doing that, you're going to put your assessment date, your score, your plan of action, and how you're going to meet those items you didn't meet, your system security plan. If you don't have a system security plan, you don't have all of this. That is going to be. And what revision is it? The date and your cage code. This is all the information you need to have prepared to go into the SPRS system. Okay? There's 3 levels, the basic, medium, and high right now in doing that. Your basic level, remember I said the FAR 52204-21 is going to be a big part. Well, that's your basic level. That's going to be considered your basic level. And that's your self-assessment at face value. You're going to put that in. But I do want to say this. When you go through and do your self-assessment, make sure anything here with a star, if you've had a federal contract with federal funding, I can almost guarantee you had FAR 52.204-21 in your contract. And you probably have already signed it, and you probably have already invoiced saying you've met those requirements. So as you go through this, any of these with that little star, you want to make sure you go through it and you're going through each of these items and make sure you meet them. Remember, in order to meet this qualification or this assessment here, you have to meet all of these to meet that. If you're missing one of these, you've not met that. And what's important, see the value of 5 for this particular one? If you meet all of those, you get a 0. If you're missing one, you keep the full value of 5. There is no partial. And you can see the next one the same. And these that I do not have this asterisk are the additional ones for the NIST 800-171. So there is a handbook, a self-assessment handbook to help you go through the items. I'm running out of time here, so I'm trying to go through. If you've had any federal funding or have the FAR 52204, your lowest score should be a -140. I have a worksheet for you, and you can see how I came up with that. If you haven't had federal contracts and you haven't done any of that, then it doesn't matter yet. But for the basic level, that's your -140. Yes, you will end up with negative scores, and you can. Right now, the important part is for you to put a score into the SPARS. Log a score in there so that you can get and work with DoD. They're not looking at the score exactly yet. What they are looking is to make sure people have scores in there. If you don't have a score in there, you're not getting any government work. Okay? This is the cybersecurity maturity model. This came about because companies were not meeting the requirements, so they had to go forward. And this is what they did. It's tiered. This is the model. Level 1 is the basic FAR. It's a self-assessment. Level 2 is the complete 110 requirements of the 800-171. Parts of those are going to be self-assessed, and some of those are going to require a third-party assessment. Level 3 is not assigned yet completely, but when you get to level 3, the government will do the assessment. So you will have a third-party assessment down here, and then the government will go up here. I'm not going to go through this. This is still in works. However, what's not in works is the 800-171. That is in contracts today. So you need to be aware of that. So you can just go through and see the changes and what's in here and what they did. The CMMC, when it comes out currently, is going to allow plan of actions with milestones, but we do not know what's going to be acceptable on those poems. There may be waivers, but those are going to be rare cases, because let me tell you, if I was a CO, I wouldn't want my name signed to a waiver. So it's going to have to be a darn good reason why you're not meeting whatever they're requesting to get a waiver. So we've gone over the FAR, the NIST, and the DFARS. They're the self-assessment, the scores. I have some links on here. One of the attachments, attachment 9, has more links than are here. But what I do want to bring out to you is that Project Spectrum, right here, is also funded by the government, DoD. This site is free, and it has questions that can help you do your self-assessment. So, and that those scores are not let out to anyone. This is for you to, it's a working site. So you can go on and put other team members on to answer questions that'll help you. This is the CMMC, System Security Plan. These are some of the references, and that's me. So I hope I didn't take up all the time, but I wanted to give you, put this information in your hands, and hopefully it'll be helpful. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Elythia. That presentation was full of information. Oh my gosh. That's very good. Thank you. I have a question. Lorie and Lisa, do you help businesses do that? Get CMMC certified?
So we have helped them understand what CMMC is and work with them on mitigating the CMMC gaps. We are not a certifying organization. We're not intending to become one. We're here to help our state become more cyber secure. And so we've worked with Elythia and others on getting the awareness out there about what they need to do. And we've had one grant from DoD that helped support doing some of that and helped to fund 10 photonics companies, help them have funding to get IT companies to come in and put in servers and firewalls and secure things that needed work. So we're continuing working with those clients on assessments and various other things. Our focus primarily, though, is on CyberReady to build up the state's cybersecurity chops, so to speak.
Oh. And Elythia, these people that, like how many people are checking to see that these vendors are certified? I mean, is that all automated? Are they,
You know what, it's going to depend on what they're doing and who does the audit. And right now it's DCAA, if I recall correctly. Okay, because I get the two mixed up. DCAA is doing the audit, and usually they send one auditor, but there could be others behind the scenes, or there could be a couple, and they'll come and check to see what you have and the documentation. It's not just that you're doing it. They're going to want proof. So your documentation is going to be so important.
Yeah, you've got to have the policies in place. You've got to have the records of what you've been doing and what mitigations you've taken. All of those things are part of 800-171. And one of the things that's exciting about the changes that have happened to CMMC since it first came out is that CMMC level 2, which is what most contractors are going to need, is 800-171. That's already required. So it doesn't change anything other than the fact that if you're handling confidential information, they're likely to audit you. And you've said you were doing it anyway, and that's how those lawsuits are happening, is because companies certified in writing to get contract work that they met those requirements, then they didn't. And the government has found government confidential information leaked all over the place. And that has led to CMMC and also the federal lawsuits against companies and the fines against companies for breach of contract, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yes, this presentation was great. It was excellent. So, well, our time is up. I would like to thank Elythia.
Before you do that, I have
ahead.
one special thank you for Elythia for doing this presentation and doing a great job. Fabulous, exciting, great interaction, but especially for doing it on your birthday. So happy birthday, Elythia.
Thank you.
Here's your virtual cake. Sorry, the candles don't show through. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, happy birthday. Shall we sing to her?
No, it's okay.